You won't see some of the graphs in color. It's not the end of the world. So while we're trying to troubleshoot, I just wanted to introduce myself and thank you guys for coming. This is a really wonderful mix of providers and community members, and just want to thank you for taking the time. So my name is Catherine Borthwick. I'm an analyst with the Community Development Division of the City of Colorado Springs. And before we kick off, I just want to kind of get a sense of who's in the room, and we want to talk about the last time you all looked for housing and what that looked like. If anybody has any juicy stories to share. Especially can everyone hear me? Should I use this?
Use that.
Is this better, or should I? Yeah, okay, much better. All right. So, as I mentioned, as we're trying to troubleshoot, I just wanted to go around the room and see if anybody had any housing stories to share. If they want to share their experience about the last time they looked for housing.
That was 25 years ago. I bought my first house. Now I have 5 years. But I can't sell because what else they will buy? I'll pay so much more money.
Right.
So you have gains from this house. And then it's very competitive.
Right. So
So home ownership just sucks.
you feel stuck.
Yeah, it
Right.
sucks.
It sucks. So, yeah, whether you're looking for a new home or trying to downsize, move, it's really complicated. Does anybody else have any other stories about how things may have changed from the first time you tried looking for housing versus the last time you tried? How the market has changed? I'm sure everyone has horror stories, either from friends or family, or from the last time they tried looking for housing. But we all know that things are definitely changing rapidly, and we're all here either on behalf of the community that we serve, or we're curious as homeowners and citizens ourselves. So just a little discussion point. I just want to hear from you why, in your words, why housing matters.
I guess I'll start.
Yeah.
So my name is Sarah, and I'm the director of an organization called Specialty Special Families, and we support people with developmental disabilities and mental illnesses to be able to live independently in their own community, and a part of independent living is affordable housing living, and so that's probably the biggest thing for us is having access to affordable housing for them.
What is the biggest barrier that you face with your the community you serve?
I think the biggest difficulty that we face is that landlords don't want to accept some of our individuals that we serve because maybe they're on a fixed Social Security income, and or the wait lists for all of those housing opportunities where there's a reduced housing or even HUD vouchers. Those are our individuals would qualify for those. They absolutely would qualify, but the wait lists are so long for all of those. And I think the apartment complexes are 5 years, and then the HUD is 6 to 10 years, what we kind of hear. So affordable housing and access to affordable housing.
Anyone else have a story about why housing matters?
Well, my name is Dave Romero. I'm a director at Silver Key Senior Services. We serve those 16 over here in El Paso County. We see a lot of our clients who are facing many barriers in our community in terms of navigating our competitive housing market. Transportation being one major barrier, and actually getting out and being able to evaluate their options as far as housing goes. And it's really restricted around what housing is available for them. As she mentioned, they're on fixed low income, Social Security mostly, and some of the property managers are requiring 2.5 to 3 times the amount of rent.
Absolutely.
And they simply don't have that. And so whenever they, are limited to these different options that fall within their income, it's usually in places that put them in in at-risk positions in terms of, slumlords or even in border situations where someone may take advantage of them. Yeah, again, just navigating is a big barrier in terms of, we mainly rely upon going onto the internet and looking at these listings, and some of our seniors don't have access to a computer, or simply don't know what websites to go to, or kind of go onto the web and do that sort of thing. So to use that and coordinate, an appointment and then packing and coordinating. So just the overall navigation into getting into housing for seniors specifically, and affordable housing has been a big struggle.
And I'd say to piggyback off of his comment, the deposits actually present a real big problem for us because they do require deposits first month rent and sometimes the last month's rent. And our individuals aren't even allowed to have more than $2,000 in an account without having any questions. So it's a vicious cycle.
Wow. Yeah, so technology, access, cash on hand, that's different choices.
So, I'm here because I want to know more about access to work. I'm from a community that a lot of our residents don't make a living wage. I'm puzzled with how we can talk about affordable housing and build new complexes, new homes that are $250,000 or $300,000 upwards and say it's affordable. Who is it affordable to? Those people that make minimum wage is not affordable. Which I'm here to find out.
Right, that gap between those who are working or have reliable income, but it's still not enough to afford market rate. Yeah, all of those are huge. And while we're getting this set up, I have one more question to ask all of you, either as individuals or as representatives of the communities you serve. With all this in mind, all the barriers that we just talked about, how does the cost of housing currently affect you and the decisions that you make? What are the trade-offs that we make when we encounter these barriers? Yes.
Sorry. So we, our case management services, we really plug into financial emergency assistance. And so we see on our end, seniors specifically compromising their health. So they're paying for their essentials like rent and utilities and food over their prescription medications or transportation to get to medical appointments. So kind of really, playing that, really struggling with handling their finances and means, because it's all almost being allocated to their housing alone. So their health is being compromised.
Yes, housing for health, that's a wicked trade-off. Anyone else have any stories about trade-offs that we make, how housing affects our decisions? Yes.
I would say that mental health is probably for families is going to be a huge piece. Because a lot of families that I see, there's parents and they're working full-time jobs and they're living in hotels or they cannot save enough money to pay these deposits and first rents, last rents, rents, or even, think about home ownership. So that is affecting mental health.
Just the stress of instability.
Because they're piled into one room, husband, wife, and children, into one room with 2 beds.
Right, and that has lasting effects. That's not just an acute problem. I saw some other hands.
You want to put your presentation up?
Oh, yes, thank you. Go ahead.
Sure. I'm Audrey Fielden from Urban Peak, and we work with youth experiencing homelessness, ages 15 to 24, so we're experiencing the same things that you guys are, for sure. I would say a trade-off for us is that time that our case managers should be spending working with our youth, we're spending trying to find housing for them, so it's a lot of dead ends, a lot of landlord conversations that aren't going anywhere, and in turn, I think the youth that we work with are suffering because they're not getting as much attention as they deserve from our case managers because they're trying to find places for them to live.
Yeah. wasted resources. Yeah. So I know that some people trickled in as we started our discussion. Once again, my name is Catherine Borthwick. I'm an analyst in the Community Development Division with the City of Colorado Springs. And I just want to thank the Senior Center for hosting us and for being so handy with the technical assistance here. I really appreciate it, and for all of you for taking the time on a Friday afternoon to come have this discussion with us. I want to recognize a couple of my colleagues in the room. One, to thank them, and two, to step out if they can answer a particularly thorny question that you may have about some of these questions. And the first one is Steve Posey. He's the leader of our Community Development Division. He works very heavily in the affordable housing development side. We've got Paul Morrow sitting in the back. He's also very involved in our housing processes, and he's especially active in our infrastructure program, our capital improvement projects. So I guess without further ado, we'll get started and talk about what today's all about. So today I just wanted it to be the majority of the time spending talking with you. How many of you here are service providers? I see, yeah, a lot of you. So I want to speak with you all peer to peer, and also for the residents who are here to talk about your experiences and how we might approach the coming year. So today, while I am talking, I just want to talk about just the basics of what community development does, what we're even talking about when I say action plan, why is that capitalized? How much money are we talking about here? This is different from main city funds. This is a whole different animal, so I just want to make sure everyone understands what that is. And local conditions, where we're prioritizing our funds, and other influencing factors that affect the decisions behind where we spend our money. And again, ending it all with community discussion. So our mission is pretty much mirrors HUD. And as the local jurisdiction, we have the pleasure and the privilege of focusing that on following the cues of the local community, where the main need is. So the money we receive from HUD comes in three main signature programs: the CDBG, Community Development Block Grant, Home, and Emergency Solutions Grant. So Congress approves the budget every year for each federal department, and once the appropriations bill is signed into law by the president, then HUD calculates how much money each locality gets based on a variety of factors. It's by formula. So we don't control, we don't apply for a certain amount. We just kind of get this money by formula. An action plan, in essence, is required. That's really why we're here. But why do we need one? When HUD gives us money, they have this crazy idea that we should tell them what we want to do with it. So the action plan lays out how we spend every cent, what outcomes we expect will come out of it, who will help us spend it, who helped us figure out how to spend it, all of that. How many people will be served by each and every program. We have to account for all of that. And then, of course, at the end of every year, we have to tell them how we did. And of course, your role, it's multifaceted. You want to be a well-informed voter. As a taxpayer, you want to know where those dollars are going. This is all taxpayer money coming back to being applied in your community. And you want to know how it's being applied in your backyard. So we think in terms of 5-year plans. The big 5-year plan guides, that's the big picture. The 5-year plan sets the big vision. The action plan is, the incremental step-by-step plan, what we say every year, what we're gonna do in any given year to achieve the larger 5-year goals. And then, of course, at the end of every year, we tell HUD how we're doing, or how we did in the CAPER. And of course, tying everything together is the citizen participation plan, which guides how we communicate with the public, how we solicit feedback, and how we make accommodations, how we incorporate community-wide work. So 2019 is a special year because we're in the last year of our current 5-year planning segment, which means it's a really important year. We have to take a look at everything we've done in the past 4 years, figure out what we still have to press the gas pedal on. But it's also exciting because that means around next summer we're going to be speaking with the community at large about the next big 5-year vision. What is the big community set of needs that, how do we recalibrate? And I have a sneaking suspicion housing is not going to go away from that list by any stretch of the imagination. So how much money are we talking about? Every year we have a pretty conservative funding estimate. When the federal budgeting process is so political that it's a little awkward, and figuring out how much we have to budget. A lot of these service providers understand that pain. So our forecasts are pretty conservative. For the last few years, we've been using the 5% scenario. So we just assume we'll get a 5% decrease from the previous year's funding. And then we have to create a contingency plan for what will happen if the funding is more or less. And then we also get some additional funds called program income that we get from other income that we're required to spend as soon as we get it. Things from like loan payments coming due, other revenue like that, surplus income from rent. So we're expecting this coming year to be about a little over $4.5 million to those 3 main programs that I explained earlier. So what does that mean? $4.6 million for a city of 500,000 people. What does that mean? To look at it in context, I've included this slide of funding trends for the last generation or so, from the year 2000 to projected amounts for 2019. So the graph that you're looking at right now shows the growth, the population growth, in comparison to the size of each entitlement bucket. And you can see how some are a little more stable than others. You can see the overall steady decrease of the community development grant funds and pretty drastic dips and climbs in the home program. And you can see for Emergency Solutions Grant, ESG, the little tiny green bar, that's what we have to deal with to fund facilities and services that prevent homelessness. So it's a very small amount of funds for the number of people that we have. So this is basically the same data, but it's visualized a little differently. We just did some math, and this is just the per capita spending for Colorado Springs in the same time frame. This is just our entitlement dollars per capita. And as you can see, the overall trend line, you see some jagged back and forth that kind of shows the political, election year movements, but overall the trend is negative. We're inching upwards after losing a lot of money per capita in 2010. But overall, this just means that we're having to do less, do more with less as our population keeps growing and some of these housing issues and other things keep getting worse. That means we have less money to do it, which means we have to be extra careful and extra strategic in how we figure out where we're going to put our money. We have to strategize the impact of every dollar that we spend. And that also highlights the importance of partnerships. This is why we go out into the community and consult with other public agencies, with service providers, to figure out where we can leverage each other's programs and dollars. So I talked about the 5-year plan, that it handles the big vision. These are the big This is the big vision, our 3 main priority areas for our current 5-year plan. Everything we've done in the last 4 years and everything we're required to do in the next year falls under these 3 overarching priority areas. So as we enter into our last year, like I said, it's really important that we meet those goals that we told HUD that we would make. So what are those? It is the the 2 highest calls that we get at the city, housing and homelessness. Those are the biggest crises that we see in our community. We get it in the calls that we get at the mayor's office, in our office, 211, CSPD, you all, I'm sure you all are frontline to these calls. So these have clearly risen to the top of everyone's to-do list. Even though we recognize that these are really multifaceted, complex problems, because of that, that's why the solutions will be just as multifaceted and require lots of stakeholder input. So I included this in here. I asked the question earlier, why does housing matter? I think sometimes we get, on a political level, involved in a lot of philosophical debates. There is no overarching philosophy that guides all of this. We look at numbers. I added this question just because it's kind of a value statement. Is housing a right? A lot of people disagree, but really, you won't see anything you won't see any mission statement in any federal agency outlining this. What we do is we respond to the problems at hand. So this is, we work with federal dollars, so this isn't a purely value-driven mission. It's also a response to very real need, shown by very real numbers, by real people. And that's why I wanted to start off and talk with you all about some of the issues that we see on the front lines, because these doesn't matter, the whole philosophical debate doesn't matter. We're seeing this on a day-to-day basis. So a lot of questions sometimes we get, why does the city need to intervene in this? Why don't we leave it up to the market? We all have seen that people's ability to find housing affects their education, their earning potential, their quality of life in the city, and directly affects the health, public health and safety of everyone in the city. So this is why we look at this. So looking at those top 2 issues of housing affordability and homelessness, I just want to take a really quick snapshot. This is a very limited snapshot on affordability. It takes a very specific scenario in mind, a family of 3 making 50% area median income, which in 2018 dollars is $35,000 a year. And this graph looks at what that income will get you rent-wise. Wages for most workers, especially low-income households, are staying level. And what are we seeing with rents? Rising. So this chart doesn't speak to availability. It's just talking about affordability. Again, the discussion that we had earlier showed that it's not just the affordability, it's the ability to find them in the first place. They're becoming like unicorns. We also see similar trends in homelessness. This is not a chart, it's just a screenshot. The Coalition of Homeless Service Providers are constantly trying to find better ways to communicate with each other and not duplicate services and figure out how to find real-time solutions to everything. So they have a Google document that's updated once, twice a day to communicate with the homeless outreach team. That's the CSPD, those are the group of CSPD officers who respond to campers and unsheltered people, experiencing homelessness. The important thing to look at here, I know this is very small, but on your packets you will see total available beds, single digits, sometimes 0 every night. RJ Montgomery 0, Springs 7. A couple nights ago we had someone from Springs Rescue Mission, we had someone else, I guess, talk about how sometimes this is a very tricky business because sometimes they have to hold beds for people who are off at work during the day and have to come back in the evenings. And sometimes this number is effectively zero. So regardless of the weather, we're dealing with shelter beds that are always at capacity. When we know that the people who are unsheltered are in the hundreds. How many of you know what a pit is? Okay, so almost half. So the pit is the point in time count. It's basically a local census of people experiencing homelessness in the community. It's a big community-wide effort held one night in January every year. They comb every shelter. They put volunteers out in the streets and camping areas, and they interview everyone they come across to ask them what their circumstances are, how long they've been homeless, things like that. So, of course, it's flawed. It's a snapshot, but it shows that's our year count, and it's generally perceived to be conservative. So, as you can see, the number of people who are we just have a huge amount of unsheltered people who are not, there's no room in the shelters for them. So who is going unsheltered? The blue bar here shows the unsheltered community, and the green are the sheltered. This is a graph of people experiencing homelessness who are called chronically homeless. That means that they've been homeless for a long time or many times in succession, and they have a disabling condition that keeps them from obtaining and keeping stable housing. We see that the number, you see these really high bars here, this says that the highest number, the populations, the biggest populations of chronically homeless people have physical disabilities or some sort of diagnosed mental illness. So this is where the need is. And as a funding source, we have to look at the documented need. So what we're seeing is this is the population who we're trying to get off the streets. So how do we get there? Also, what is there? Where is there? There is trying to bring homelessness down, to make homelessness brief, rare, and non-recurring. So this is why the city is investing in homeless shelters that are low barrier, that will accept these, that accept people as they are. That's what low barrier means. That you can't attempt to deal with their issues until they've been stably housed or sheltered. So in addition to that, connecting them to affordable housing means connecting them to resources. So this is where we have been trying to invest a lot of our dollars into our shelters who are doing that or on their way to accomplishing that. So the big dilemma though is finding housing for them. So again, where is there? There is finding housing for people at every income level, every ability. So we have a range of tools to, well, we're trying to get to a place where we have a range of tools to address the affordable housing issue, to house those with those who are the most vulnerable, to those who maybe just need a few months financial assistance, for those families who, have just hit upon, some hard times and need a few months of assistance. So, achieving a successful affordable housing plan requires a multi-pronged approach that mixes in new construction along with rehabilitation and acquisition of existing housing and investing in home ownership opportunities. We see the number of renters go up every year. Well, I think renting isn't necessarily a bad thing, we do see that homeownership, the prospect of homeownership is becoming less and less accessible to more people, so we are trying to close that gap by providing more opportunities for that. So for new construction, what we are aiming as a division is to add 400 to 600 units of subsidized rental housing units per year by targeting households earning up to 50% area median income. We also intend to prioritize permanent supported housing as a form of deeply subsidized housing that will provide, of course, as the name suggests, permanent housing to those who are experience those disabling conditions that that you saw a few slides ago. We want to encourage infill development, make it easier to build inside the city where there are already services. It's, as you know, it's really expensive to build out, to keep building out further and further to meet new infrastructure. We want people to be able to access services that they already enjoy it, but it keeps the cost down to not have to build infrastructure every time you build new housing units. We want to encourage co-locating housing with other supportive services, amenities, transit, health services, access to cultural and recreational amenities. And we are trying to position ourselves to be a resource for development financing and try to reach the development community both in Colorado Springs, statewide, nationwide, and provide a whole suite of development tools to entice people to come live here. Rehabilitation and acquisition is a really important piece. We have a lot of what we call NOAHs, naturally occurring affordable housing, that is about to transition to more luxury rates. And what we're trying to do is capture some of those naturally affordable housing units and maintain that level of affordability for more people to live. Where are we? We're also trying to position ourselves to create new relationships for energy efficiency programming. That, as we know, energy is eats a huge chunk out of our housing budget every month. So the more we can kind of turn that into our housing. Sorry, I'm losing that one. So the more we can incorporate that into our housing strategy, the further that will bring housing costs down for the consumer. And we also have a lot of key relationships with people who are in this room, with Greshia, with the Housing Authority, to work with their housing assets and bring them up and make them accessible, give them to rehab them as required. And we also are looking at extending the life of subsidies of projects that received low-income tax credits or other forms of subsidies, over 10 years ago, and those are about to expire. So we're looking at how we can identify those before they expire and extend them. And then with homeownership, we have some key relationships with land trusts, with community housing development organizations to invest in homeownership opportunities for moderate income households that are more capable of achieving long-term financial stability with limited investment. So down payment assistance, things like that. We work with Rocky Mountain Community Land Trust, Pikes Peak Habitat for Humanity, Greshio. We also want to work on cutting down costs on the development side and creating parallel processes for development financing and land entitlement. So we're trying to look at it from all angles. While we're on this slide, I just wanted to see if you might add a few words about the strategy.
I think you covered it very well.
So that's what we're trying to do with the around billion or so dollars of home funds that you saw on the pie chart. And beyond that, that third priority area that you saw in the slide previously, the stabilized struggling neighborhoods, we're still doing that with a variety of other tools by investing in infrastructure, rehabbing playgrounds, recreational equipment, doing a facade improvement program in the southeast where we use underutilized commercial areas and kind of give them a makeover to increase traffic, sales tax, just creating a third space for communities to gather in. And neighborhood planning. We're just wrapping up a Mill Street neighborhood plan for the Mill Street area, which will kind of encapsulate all of these goals that we talked about, dealing with crime, safety, commercial revitalization, housing affordability, preservation, cultural amenities, trail connectivity, all that good stuff. So, so this is how we try to make those $4.5 million or so that we get every year from HUD stretch and maximize that input or impact. So there are other things that influence how we plan. We don't work in a vacuum. We work with our partners, and this is just not a comprehensive list, but this is a look at some of the other things that we keep in mind. The new comprehensive plan that's about to be adopted by council by the end of the year. The mayor's office just released an action plan for homelessness response that will be complementing a lot of that work in our plan. Age-friendly Colorado Springs. That's a big influencing factor. You know, gotta look at demographics. We have an aging community, and we have lots of very, very real needs about what their health and housing needs are, and how to plan for more accessible neighborhoods, and so to keep people in their houses as long as they wish, and not have to, go bankrupt to move to assisted living. We also work with the area's continuum of care. They're the countywide coalition of service providers who look at our homeless service data and collaborative applications to HUD. And we also look at really successful planning organizations like the West Coalition, which is just this huge collection of Southeast advocates and residents who are doing some really phenomenal work around improving outcomes for their residents. Again, neighborhood plans, and we're trying to be out in the community several times a year to hear from you about how we're doing and what you see on the street, as they say. So with that, we kind of talked about these questions. If people want to open it up to you guys and get it. Yes?
Down payment program, down payment assistance program, is it already in place, or this is for the future?
That is already in place. With those programs, we're always looking at ways to expand capacity. Do you want to speak to that, Steve?
There are actually two programs that are currently up and running. One of them is offered by the Rocky Mountain Land Trust, and they assist home buyers, people who want to buy a house, to go find one here in the community. And then there's another one that is offered through a number of different local banks. It is actually managed by El Paso County, and it's called their Turnkey Program. We can get you some contact information for that.
Okay.
Sure. If you're on the sign-in sheet, we can make sure we get you some contact information for that.
Thanks for the reminder. Did anyone not sign the sign-in sheet? So did anyone have any questions about the materials that I presented? Or, yes?
Yes, something about the NOAA
Yes, naturally occurring.
How are you guys trying to keep those, or what's the
That is a work in progress. What we,
plan? I mean, you don't have a thing.
right now, it's kind of based on our relationships, knowing whose subsidies are expiring. We're trying to figure out a way to get that information real time.
So you guys talking about acquiring those properties so that we can maintain the affordable rents they're having, so we can't turn them into luxury apartments? Or
No, we're not, if we could acquire some properties, or if we could help some of the existing housing organizations in the community acquire those properties, we're certainly encouraging that. We're also trying to be more proactive with properties that are changing hands. I think everybody probably knows about the Emerald Towers situation that happened last year. We don't want to see that happen again. And in an effort to prevent that, not to stop the sale of the property, but to be able to assist folks who would be affected by that turnover. We are becoming much more engaged with the apartment association and with the new owners of some of those properties so that we can talk to them about a more managed process, particularly of people who have been in a building for a long time and pay, $500, $600
Right.
in rent are suddenly going to have to move because the rents in that building are going to go up to say $800, $900, $1,000 a month. We are trying to work with those new owners to make sure that we can be at the table as that process unfolds and make it less traumatic and wrenching for the tenants who are affected by that. So those are the main things. The other piece in terms of naturally occurring housing is to try to get a better picture of what the rental market looks like across Colorado Springs, and so that we can be ready to respond to some of these changes that are coming up.
So if an apartment complex were for sale and it was like an affordable rate currently, are you guys able to help? Like if you found somebody who's willing to take it over and guarantee the rent stay the same, are you guys in a position to help an
Absolutely.
owner take over with the
Absolutely.
guarantee that those rents would stay the same instead of some corporate 5-month insane rent person buying?
Absolutely. And that, we don't have a whole lot of money to work with.
Right,
So really, our role is not to step in and buy the property.
right.
Our role is to try to put together the people who can buy the property and keep it affordable.
And if there's something that will drive the, like a big rehab project that they want to like repaint and redo carpets that will drive the rent up, we can help rehab those and in turn create some more accessible units.
And just to circle back to the utilities piece for a minute, one of the things that happens is that even if you can find an affordable apartment, some of them have such old heating equipment in them and the buildings themselves are really not in the best of shape that, okay, let's say your rent is $600 a month, your utility bill could be $400 a month. And the combined burden of those two costs is something that is really making housing even more unaffordable. So we're really engaged with Colorado Springs Utilities right now to see how can we address both. We've got programs in place where if you're a homeowner, you can come in and you can receive some help getting your house weatherized, getting windows, getting better weather stripping, getting better insulation and so forth. But we have not been able to push that into the rental market yet. And that is one of the goals for this coming year, is to figure out how can we make that available to renters. So, if you've got it, yeah, it'll help.
Anyone have any questions about some of the stuff I was talking about? I went on it like.
Is the rent control a impossible thing to do?
In Colorado right now, yes, that's, there's no state statute that's
What does it take to rent a
state law.
There you go.
You have to tell people that we're no longer allowed to have a flea market, and then you're no longer allowed to do whatever you want to with your own property. And then you have half, a little more America, up in arms talking about freedom, and it's not gonna happen. It'd be nice, but that would require people not to agree. And, well, that's just against human nature, so.
Because many apartments here raise them 10 to 12%. We don't get that rate, we don't get that kind of loan. Not even 3%.
I think a start could be, and this would also be a change in state law, you know, rent increase caps. There's, you can't raise more than a certain percent in your, or it has to be.
Also, along those lines, we're watching the rental market pretty closely, and over the last 2 years, there's been a run-up in apartment construction. The forecast at this point is that that's going to drop off because the market cannot absorb that many more high-end apartment rentals, units. So I do think that we're going to see some softening in rents across the community as we get into 2019. And I know that,
You keep building, then you bring the cost. You just keep building the apartments, they will bring the cost down, the rent.
well, but actually, we're not going to see that many more apartments coming online for the time being.
Prices are gonna drop.
They're
Look at San Antonio or Tacoma or any of those places. I was actually talking with some friends this morning. That is most places, and you go down the highway or any street where there's apartments, and they have big, first month's rent free, or, second and third month's free, because there's so many apartment complexes that they're competing to get renters in. But here, you don't have to compete. There's a housing shortage.
I know,
They don't have to
but we're-
compete for anything. Like, no, you pay your deposit, you pay this, and give me your first kid, and maybe I'll give you an apartment.
So I'm going to look into my housing crystal ball. I do think that those conditions are going to change.
I hope so. I think that we need more, I think that, my fear is that they're not going to change while the apartment owners know that they have the upper hand. Because
But
they know
I-
that there's a limited commodity.
One of the reasons I'm saying that is because I am already hearing from builders of market rate apartment complexes that we're not going to do another one right now because we can't get the rents that we want to charge or that we need to charge in order to cover the cost of the development.
So they're just not going to build any more apartments, or are they going to start building more cost affordable apartments? Because we still need apartments, we just need ones that are affordable.
You're absolutely right, point very well taken. They're not going to build more apartments. So there is going to be increased demand on what's already here, particularly at the lower income levels. And that's why we are trying to get out there at the table with some of these folks who are buying up the less expensive apartment buildings and then wanting to remodel those and then increase the rents there. Because we want to try to be there to lessen that impact on the community overall.
So are we doing anything to encourage apartment builders who want to build affordable apartments in general?
Of course, the finance mechanisms that are available for that, and I don't want to get too wonky about how the money works, but it's a limited pie. Here in Colorado Springs, we do have a goal of seeing 400 to 600 units get built over the coming year, and that would be consistent with the amount of units that we've seen built over the last 2 years. So we want to at least maintain where we're at this point. And I know from a person on the street perspective who's trying to find an affordable place to live, it doesn't help a whole lot to hear that we're actually building as many as we ever have built in this community at any time. But that's the truth of it. The production level for truly subsidized rental housing is as high as it has ever been in this community. It's not enough, but it is there. And we will fight to keep that at the level that it has been over the last couple of years.
There is a bringing in formal organization called tenants union.
Yes.
Yeah, have you heard of it?
Yes, doesn't have anything to do with the city, but I did learn of their organization at the Renters' Rights Workshop to organize, but, I mean, if they do, I think that'll have an effect on at least some of the practices, maybe not rents, but maybe some of the fees or deposits, you know, who knows? But that's all based on the effectiveness of their strategies and organization.
Are you guys kind of keeping up to date as far as legislation goes around administration and application fees, which is kind of on a focus right now?
We're members of Housing Colorado. We get policy updates. We get to take surveys on all that and get updates, especially with our local reps. So we also have available a fair housing guide, so we try to stay up to date on any legislative changes. The most recent one being the rent receipt requirement. So when things like that happen, we try to update all of our informational materials for renters and landlords. So the answer is yes, but more information is great, so become a resource. Also, is there anything that what you heard here that maybe you want to know how you would have heard about it if you weren't here? Like how do you seek out this information about local housing and community development policy?
I like to shake my magic crystal ball at you.
I guess what I'm asking is how would it how would you like to see some of this information shared throughout the year? Where do you get your information? In what format does it release? Yes?
I know for us here, we are always giving out information to patrons in our community, but we know nothing. So if we could be informed so that we can inform our patrons, that would be awesome.
Okay.
I think simply having stuff available online, like, I've lived in a lot of places over the years in this country. Colorado Springs is definitely, in the term secret squirrel, about like 90% of what goes on in the city until the last second. Like the homeless action plan the mayor magically came up with that nobody knew about until it was released, or the handful of people who helped him on it. Like 90% of the people who work in nonprofits and we had no idea this thing had even been thought about, let alone was about to be released, and then boom, magically it's there. We're like, there's a lot of stuff, and if you go online and try and find information, there's a lot of things that you just can't find. So I think just simply having it available and known that, hey, it's on our website, and you can click this link, and it's easy to find, you don't have to click 100 links to get to it, would be great.
So I'm glad you mentioned that. Did you go to the town hall? So there's a series of town halls. I wish I had the dates up, but for everyone who's here, you might be interested. The city's homelessness response and prevention, prevention and response coordinator has been holding a series of town halls, and we'll have about 5 more through December. So check that out.
Yeah, I went to the first time. It was interesting.
So thank you for mentioning that, because I want to talk about the order that we're doing this in. So in addition to these, this is the second of 3. What we're calling these formal, because you're coming to us. But if you have neighborhood networks or your through your organization, talk to your clients, your neighbors, your whatever, let me know. I am happy to take this show on the road and have more conversations, because I know I'm always so grateful when people come to these listening sessions, but I try to be accessible to people. So please let me know in the next couple of months. And when I say a couple of months, it's because at the end of the year, all of this input and all of the data that we've been generating goes into the plan. So then in the beginning of 2019, you'll be seeing a draft of the plan that we're talking about, the 2019 action plan. So you've signed in on the sheet, but I can leave my card available. So let me know if you have any organization get some last minute feedback from you all. Just based on what you've heard, the organizations that we work with and the strategy that we try to take with working with as many people as possible. Who else do you see, who do you see as missing from these conversations? Who do you think needs to be involved in helping solve some of these issues using this particular fund or not, just in the city in general? What are better ways we can involve the whole community in coming up with strategies to deal with homelessness and affordable housing? Any models that you've seen in other cities or people that you work with here in the city that maybe aren't in the city? San Antonio? What is it about the...
They have gated the road, which reduced their home population by over 90%, so. they get it.
Is that the big campus?
Yeah.
Oh, I keep thinking you're raising.
I'm sorry. I'm just moving my camera.
I would just say nationwide, the issue that isn't being approached very effectively is mental health. And that is one of the biggest contributors to homelessness, I think.
Yeah.
And, I think it has to start in Washington to take the lead. It hasn't happened in a long time. And I can remember when I was a child, there were probably 10 times the number of mental health facilities that there are today. They just leave them out in the streets. They don't do anything for them. And I think that's a huge
Or they're in
problem.
jail,
I think these are all, you've got to continue to get community citizens. And I think that's part of the challenge. You've got a bunch of nonprofits who are funded either by government grants or the community. And quite honestly, the fastest way to raise funds is not through the government, it's through individuals. And so there's got to be continued ways of creating that community sense where people start to tax themselves in a kind and generous way versus flipping the switch on the government side of things.
That's so easy.
Oh, I know it's.
A very good friend of mine,
Trust
at
me.
church, used to go out to help the homeless get the food.
Yeah.
And the pastor made them stop doing that, so it's dangerous.
Well, and I'm not saying that, I'm saying actually to give money more than do. But I think there's a lot of other smart people, but there's got to be, we've got to continue to engage all of these. And there's going to be some key influential business leaders who I think are going to be able to drive some of these things.
And actually, healthcare providers are not on that list.
yes.
To circle back to Jim's point, that's a big omission.
That's huge.
Catherine?
Sorry, it's based on the slide.
I agree with the medical provider point because we are seeing inappropriate use of ED, which is kind of, it does strain our tax dollars and Medicaid and those sort of things. And, homelessness within itself is a big factor in expediting or, causing chronic health conditions, which kind of, again, lead down that road or that hole of medical problems down the road. And so, there are people on the medical health provider side who are looking to get involved and just kind of get aware of what's going on in the community in terms of ethical issues. There's been recently an established group of, doctors and so on. Dr. Robinson is one who is getting her ethics committee. They just got established and now they're looking to take some issues from the community in terms of ethical issues.
And higher education. Those dorms, why can't each dorm take a homeless person one night? So they can have a shower, they can have just one dorm per night for one homeless individual, whether it's female or male. Then endowment. Indirectly, those endowments are building the homes indirectly. So those universities approach with the endowments that, in addition to small investment, large investment, this is another investment, local community investment. You know, to grow their reputation. They are running their great now. Right. And then they have major like political science, law. Why did they study? They should take it home. They study that. They study out their mental health condition. They have the health major, the nursing major. And then, you know, that would be not that practical way to help students get better. Yeah, this student help the homeless and find out this the social problem, the mental health problem, family problem, drug addiction. That's a sociology student, right?
UCCS is kind of already doing that. Their Master of Innovation program actually has a thing where they're actually helping our nonprofit inside tiny homes for us right now, which is awesome. But yeah, they have a thing where they, the students have to either go talk to a homeless person, or go talk to 5 homeless care providers, or go talk to community members and get the various aspects of homelessness from the different viewpoints. And it's very enlightening for the students and helps them a lot. I agree. I think that we need to start educating people more on who the homeless are and why they're homeless and how they're homeless and how easy it is to become homeless. And maybe we wouldn't have so much fear, and then maybe we'd have more people willing to donate to help because they wouldn't be like, no, they clearly did this in themselves, you're on your own.
I'm so glad that you all brought this up. The city has started engaging with the community's colleges. In fact, we did a project this summer with the Quad. It's an Air Force Academy, UCCS, PPCC, right? PPCC is in there. Collaboration. They did a summer intensive on the subject of permanent supportive housing. And if anyone is interested, I printed out some, so thank you for bringing that up, I almost forgot. If anyone's interested in reading their final report, they came to the city to ask, you know, what, if there's anything that we could help educate the community on. And it was the idea of providing housing for those with most, who are hardest to serve, all the disabling conditions, and making 0 to 30%, you know, area median income. So this is what they do. So, does anyone else have any other final thoughts? I don't want to keep you later than.
Have you ever considered some of the huge baby organizations?
Yeah, consider that. They're very expensive for the dilapidated old buildings that they are.
Yeah, so we have, I mean, I'm only speaking on behalf of community development. We have habitability standards that we have to meet, so we can't, and also, since we're not a provider, we're not offering those out. But if, again, someone wanted to help acquire the building, we have the financing tools for that, but we can't run the program. But,
Sadly, the government thinks that, yes, we need to dilapidate building is definitely worse than living on the street to do that.
A lot of people, I found firsthand who had serious mental issues. And a lot of other people know that, obviously, or at least this way they get it.
I think I'm Travis with the Springs Rescue Mission. You mentioned San Antonio. Springs Rescue Mission is trying to create a best of similar differences as privately funded versus, government funded. So we're trying to.
The mayor supporting it is a big, huge difference.
Well, and the mayor has been fantastic, the city's been, and so to that, the city's been gracious to appropriate money so we can have another 150 beds. So this week with cold temperatures, we returned away about 20 individuals last week, and when we get these new beds, our hope is that we won't have to turn anybody away. But there are a lot of those services trying to do collaborative mental health, physical health with 23 partner agencies on the campus trying to help individuals situation is dire, but there are some things I think starting to pop in the community, or at least a step forward, not a full step, but a step forward.
Thank you. And we really appreciate the vision that Springs Rescue Mission has. It's not about shelter, it's about full employment, about services, connection, and what Urban Peak does. They're our model program for youth homelessness. It's never just about shelter, it's about the supportive services that helps people, stabilize and not return to homelessness again. So, for everything that all of you do in your organizations, we recognize that. I tried to show in the presentation is where our dollars follow the data. So we are always open to more conversations about creative thinking. I really liked your idea. So I'll leave my card out and feel free to stay in touch. It is, and it's also right here. But if there's anything else that, any other questions that people had for Steve or Paul or